Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Ruby Rogues podcast. This week on our panel, we have Luke Stutters.
Hello.
I'm Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs, and this week we have a special guest, and it's Mateus. Yeah, you have this long name that I know I will screw up, so why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, let us know who you are, why you're famous, all that good stuff.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mateus. I'm a developer from Brazil. I work at a company called Thoughtbot, and today we're here to talk about comments, which I didn't think was such an intriguing topic, but here we are.
Yeah, I remember the Thoughtbot newsletter, giant robots. So I don't know if they still do it, but yeah, anyway, I just loved the name, so.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they still run that as well.
Yeah, I don't know. As the leading digital platform for medical professionals, Doximity is transforming the healthcare industry. Founded in 2010, Doximity's mission is to help physicians save time so that they can provide better care for patients. They build secure and modern communication, workflow, and networking tools. Over 1.8 million healthcare professionals, including over 80% of U.S. doctors, rely on Doximity in their day-to-day practice. Their tools are physician-first and patient-centered. Doximity is a remote-first distributed team, and they take pride in the culture they've built. They recognize that the company is successful when people are successful. They've built a diverse team with an inclusive culture, and they're multicultural, multilingual, and international. Their diversity is their code too. They build products with Ruby, Rails, Vue.js, and Golang. They'd like you to come join their mission to make every physician more productive so they can provide better care for their patients. Visit workat.doximity.com to see open positions, employee interviews, and Doximity in the news. Anyway, we ran across your article about don't use comments, use code. In other words, comments suck. They're the devil, and you're bad if you like them, right? That's what I got. So,
That wasn't what I'm planning to say, but I hope it's
okay.
It's worse than that, Chuck. The first line of this article is comments are a code smell. So not only are they the devil, but they're a smelly devil too.
Oh, I thought that was just you, Luke. But no, my kids have been in my office. That's what I'm smelling. Anyway, yeah, take a shower, man. Anyway, so let's talk about comments, right? Because I think I read the article, like 90% of this stuff, I'm just like, yeah, that makes sense. There are a few places where I might disagree with you or I might have thoughts. But yeah, let's just talk about the idea of when and why not to use comments, when not to and why not to.
Yeah.
So where do you see people dropping them in where they shouldn't be?
I think most examples I've put on that blog post were things that are seen in real life. And I think comments had a bad use when they're trying to explain what the code is doing. For example, I've seen a lot of people, especially beginners, but I have seen senior developers doing this as well. Like for each line on their code, they would put a comment above it explaining what that line was supposed to do. And this is a bad sign, in my opinion. Like, I believe that your code should be readable enough that you can read the code and understand what it is doing. And if you can do that, the problem is on the code itself. Sometimes, I think the thing is, this applies to most times. I'm not saying this is a rule and every comment is bad. I'm just saying that most comments that I've seen around could be better if they were replaced by code itself, not comments. Especially in this example where you put like a comment for each line, it is very easy to refactor that line and refactor that code. And with time, the comments do not reflect the current code. So the comments get like out of date with the code itself. So the comments are not true anymore, but they still there. So whenever people read that code, they are like unsure if the comments is right or if the code is right. What's the right one here? So Those are the places where I think comments are not a good fit.
That makes sense. And I generally agree with you, right? If you're trying to explain what the code does, yeah, just write the code so that it tells you what it does.
Yeah. And it's not like something that is really hard to say. And I think this is especially useful for dynamically typed languages like Ruby or Python, where you don't have like explicitly static types in the code, because types give you a hint of what you're trying to do. So sometimes people use comments to kind of try and address some of that. But if you like have a method in a Ruby method and you receives like a user as an argument, you kind of have idea of what is going on. If it's a Rails app, you probably are receiving like a user model or something. But if you have like an argument called data, that could mean anything. So it's not a good name for a variable. So sometimes people call their variables like data or value and put a comment right above user. So that's not neither. It's just more code. So just name your variables and methods well, and you walk 90% of the way to having better code. It's not hard.
Yeah.
But I know that naming is one of the hardest problems in computer science, but that's why they're important, because they reveal the intention of the code.
Yeah.
What's the worst comment you've ever seen? what I want to understand is where did this hatred of comments come from? I want to find the comment that hurt you in your past. What's one that really stands out?
I don't think there's any comment that is particularly bad, or that I don't think that I hate comments as well. I think maybe the way I phrase it sounds really angry, but I wasn't trying to do that. I think the thing is, sometimes I think comments is just a lazy way to problems. Like you have to name something and you're kind of in that place where naming is hard, and you're kind of trying to figure out a good name, a good abstraction for that. You just can't find it, and you go ahead and put a comment because it's easier. You explain it with a big word and lots of words so people can understand, but that's just giving up. And I think it was DHH that said that sometimes he stares at code for like 1 hour or two, just trying to think about a good name for an abstraction, a good name for method or whatever. So I think that's a good example of sometimes naming is hard, but when you get that concept done and when you get that thing named, I think it opens up something in your mind. You unblock this concept and you can work much easier in the future when everyone on the team agrees on a name, on a concept. That makes everything easier. So when you gave up and just put on a comment, I think most times it's being lazy, is giving up. But yeah, I don't think I have like a specific example of a comment that is bad. But one thing that I hate is when the comments lie. So I got this app and they have a comment for a number that meant a certain time in seconds, but it wasn't actually in seconds. It was in minutes. So the comment was lying. So this is bad. So this is one of the places
that before.
And you can test that because comments are not testable. So that's another thing that I think code is better. You can have all the benefits of code. You can have testing, which is awesome. You can test everything. Comments are not testable. You can use linkers. You can use tools to check the code complexity. If you have like a type check language, you can use types. You can use all the benefits that code brings. But when you recur to comments, that's it. You can do anything else. That's it. And you are out of health. For example, if you're refactoring and you're relying on comments, it's kind of hard to get it right. But if you have like a compiler or a linter to help you, it's much easier because it's code.
Why do you think, and it's very common, especially when you start programming, why do you think people write, for example, one comment per line? So you find these methods where they've literally got maybe one or two comments per step. Why do you think people tend to do that, especially when they start programming?
When it's a beginner doing that, I don't mind that, but because I think when we are beginners, at least that was my experience. I was just trying to get things done. I was fighting the language. I started with C, so I was fighting the language all the time. And comments were a way to remind myself what I'm doing, what I'm supposed to do. So I would write like comments at steps. I should do this and then that and then that, and I should get that in the end. It's almost like a TDD, but with comments. And then what I would try is converting the comments into code. So that's fine. I think that's fine because it's like a framework for you to get your ideas into code. And the comments is kind of a middle step between those things. That's fine. I have nothing against that. But whenever the code is done, then now it's time to make the code speak for itself. And obviously, I won't require a beginner to do that because you're still exercising your developer mind. You're still trying to grasp a lot of concepts at the same time. But I won't require a beginner to get like the best code out of his mind on the first try. But a more senior developer, when they finish code, when code works, that doesn't mean that the work is done. That was just the first part. You make the code work. Now you make it better. Now you make it with good names. Now you make it faster. Like you have a lot of next steps there. As they say, you make it work, then you make it better. So that for beginners, it's okay. Leave comments. It's okay. So you go back to the code you wrote a couple of weeks ago and you remember what you were doing. But for more expert, a more senior developer, I think you should make your code speak for itself.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes I found that it's a little bit tough to nail down exactly how to explain what the code is doing. And so then I put a comment in just to kind of clarify, hey, this is kind of what we're fighting with right now. So
yeah. And that's fine as well. I think I mentioned in the article, I'm not against comments. I think I'm more against comments that explain what the code is doing and not why it's doing, which is different. Because sometimes you can express the why with the code itself. For example, I had this weird API that I was working with, and it required me to send like query params in a specific order. And if you change the order, it won't work. So that's something that you can explain exactly with code. So I think that's a good case to explain with a comment like, okay, this API is kind of banana. So we have to do this funky stuff here, but it's only required on this place. So whenever people see that code and see what you're doing and they think it's weird, they can read that comment and, oh, okay, that's why. And if in the future we change that API, we can get rid of that code that makes that crazy stuff because it was only needed for that specific case. So comments are indeed a good message in this particular case because you are like communicating with developers in a way that code can. And you're not explaining what the code is doing. You're explaining why you're doing that and why that matters.
Yep.
It's a really great article and it's got lots of really well written, really clear, lots of great examples, lots of good advice. And I disagree with very nearly everything you have to say. I'm really looking forward to this episode. So we'll open with my salvo of why I think that comments are better than code. And I'm going to throw some outrageous statements out there as I usually do. And I want you to put me straight because people know I'm wrong. So I would rather have comments in a code base than tests.
Oh, that's a broad statement.
Whoa! What?
You pull up the big guns.
I would rather have comments in the code and tests. But let's circle back to that one. When you talk about comments per line, I found that really interesting because when I see comments per line, we've all done it. What that to me says, this developer is operating pretty much on the edge of what they can do. You don't write comments per line if you're in your comfort zone. This to me says This person is out of their comfort zone and they're talking their way through it. And arguably, if you really want to kind of do new stuff and kind of push boundaries ahead, you should be coding at the edge of your comfort zone. So this to me says this is a guy who's kind of sweating and working really hard. You know, this is someone who's really pushing the envelope of what they can do. So arguably, when I see comments per line, I'm like, oh, we're getting stuff done here. Let's go. how would you say that? How would you respond to that? My thesis that comments show that developers are working as hard as they possibly can.
I think that that's fair. I think that's true. When I say that it's okay for a beginner to do that, I don't mean just a beginner in code in general. I mean a beginner in any matter. Like, I'm trying to learn a new language. Say you've worked with Python your whole life and you're trying to learn this thing called Rust now. You're gonna have a hard time because it's completely different. So you're a beginner in Rust, even though you're like a senior developer or whatever in Python. You're now a beginner in Rust and you are working outside of your comfort zone. So it's okay to put comments because you didn't fully grasp all the concepts yet. So yeah, 100% of that.
I'm playing devil's advocate. I want to go back to what I said about I'd rather have comments than tests. So this is a totally true story. And by amazing coincidence, since the start of December, I've been doing some work on a 10-year-old PHP code base that was developed entirely in Portuguese.
Whoa.
So this is a going concern. This is a live site, does a lot of business, and the developers have kind of are missing, presumed gone. So I received a distressed call, and I have a language which I don't really know, PHP, in a language I definitely don't know, which is Portuguese. And here's the thing. When I say this is written in Portuguese, I mean all the variables are named and all the methods are named in Portuguese. And to give you an example, when we say DB for database, that doesn't appear in this code base. It is, of course, BD.
Yeah.
Base the data, right?
Yeah.
That's what people say in, am I correct?
Yeah. It's the other way around.
If there had not been a critical mass of long form comments written in Portuguese that I could have put in to Google Translate and deciphered Google Translate's awful Portuguese rendering. It really is bad. Google Translate does not speak Portuguese at all. It's dreadful. Some of my mother's fluent in Spanish, so I got her to kind of have a go at some of it, but it's very different. If it hadn't been for these long comments, I would have had no chance at debugging these issues. And because I'm fixing bugs, the tests really don't kind of help me that much because it's just a straight up, this doesn't print, can you fix it? So that's why in that case, any number of tests wouldn't have helped me at all. But those few long form comments in Portuguese, some of them from 2011, for somebody written in, this is what this does, absolutely saved my bacon and got the system working. So that is why I would rather have comments than tests.
Yeah, in that case, I guess you probably are right, but I don't think that's the rule. I think you're trying to make an exception the rule, which is not what I'm saying here. I think what the goal of the article was say most of the comments are not needed. Maybe it's like that 80-20 thing, like 80% of the comments are not needed. And I think you're trying to make that 20% of it the rule here. And it's a particular case, and it's a kind of tricky one. Like, I don't know what I would do in that case, but I think the comments helped you understanding the code, and that's great. But when you have a bug like this, the first thing that I would do is creating a test so I can reproduce it, and then I can fix it and see the test pass. So I wouldn't add a comment. I wouldn't add a test to fix that. So I think I would rather have both and not only comments in that case.
That's entirely fair. There's a bit in your blog post about magic numbers, and in fact there's no to magic numbers. And what I like about the structure of your article is not only do you give a kind of don't do this, do that, but give an even better example of do squared, which is kind of like this is what a pro coder tip. And in the magic number section, I prefer the don't section. I like the code better. I don't know if you can see it, Chuck, but I like the code better in the don't section.
I'd love to hear why.
Now, for the benefit of the listeners, in the don't section, it says channel ID 0, #general, saying that this 0 stands for channel general. And then you move to putting a constant called general channel ID. So instead of going 0, you go general channel ID. And in the last one, you actually use an open struct, which is a really nice readable way of doing it. So you have a struct containing all the channel IDs. So you can go channel IDs dot general. I love using structs in Ruby because it means you can use the dot notation. It looks really nice. It's a real upgrade. But I prefer the don't one. I genuinely do like that one because it's simpler. Do you think there's a kind of sometimes magic numbers? Can I have some magic numbers?
I don't see a good way of doing that throughout a code base. Like, if you have it in one place, maybe that's fine. But if you have code like this all throughout your app, like you have zeros and ones and twos everywhere, how do you keep track of what is it? And when you change one of those numbers, how do you change? You go into shotgun surgery throughout your app, like changing every file everywhere. So not only comments are worse here in the sense that it is fragile, but in the sense of refactoring as well. If you have like a constant, even like an object, even a global variable here would be better because you only have to change in one place. And I've used OpenStruct in that example just because the dot notation is cool, as you said it, but it could be anything. Could be in an object, could it be in an hash, probably a hash. It would be more idiomatic in Ruby. But that doesn't matter. What really matters here is the concept. Like, the comments are fragile. And if you do it in one place, that's okay because you always find that place and the comment right after it. But if you're doing in a lot of places, it's hard to keep track of all that because not always you're going to use the comment. You're not required to put a comment. But if you use a constant, you'll always put a constant because you can access the value anyway. So you automatically enforce users to write good code when you have a constant like that instead of a comment. So I think that's a win-win situation.
Thwarted again. All right, I'll try again. There's a bit called the Just Do It section, which is definitely not a copyright infringement or a trademark. Section talks about replacing inline, in this case it's a system call to turn off the output of the terminal when you're typing the password. And what you've done is you've replaced this friendly, open, transparent system call with a mysterious module called terminal, and that module has some singleton methods defined on it. So instead of going system stty minus echo, you instead say terminal dot disable echo. And the idea is that this then tells someone who's not familiar perhaps with the Linux command line that this is what this command actually does. Now, don't you think that's an unnecessary abstraction? Do we really need a module to turn off the terminal? And isn't terminal a very general word like data? Aren't you being inconsistent here?
I think that's a good abstraction to do, probably because with an abstraction like that, you could handle different shells. Like, I don't know if it's the same comment for every OS, for example. So you could have that abstraction handling all that so your code don't have to think about if it's running on a Mac OS, on a Linux or whatever. So I think that's worth doing. And another thing that I think is cool about having methods that I didn't put here, but come to my mind now is we could use like a terminal dot disable echo and pass a block, and only the code inside that block would be with the terminal disabled. So that would be a cool thing. So you don't have to remember to re-enable in the end. Kind of like what Ruby does with opening files. You pass a block, use the file, and after the block, the file is closed. You don't have to close it manually. That avoids a whole lot of problems. So to me, that's another benefit of extracting it. I could accept another suggestion instead of terminal. I think that's a better word that I thought about it. But if you all have a good suggestion, I'm happy to update the article. That's why we have pair programming and code reviews anyway. So this is not like the best code in the world. It's just like a version that is better than the comment version, in my opinion.
So what you're saying is by removing the comment, not only is the code easier to understand, but it's also easier to change and extend.
Exactly.
Well, I could disagree more. So there. But it's not going very well for me, Chuck. Here, I don't know if you can help me out.
No, I agree with most of the stuff here. I have a couple of things here that I disagree with, but I kind of want to call out some of the things that are here. I do agree with you on the magic number, because I mean, it channel 0, and then, but I wouldn't put hash general. I would put something like 0 is the general channel for my comment. But at the same time, I do also find it more elegant to, to put, I don't love constants. I don't. And so I would rather just define the variable general channel equals 0 as a variable and just do it that way, as opposed to the all caps constant.
If that is used only on that file, that solves the problem, right? You could that is called like an explaining variable. You can extract like explaining variables all the time. For example, I like to do it on if statements. If you have like a long if statement, instead of having like all of those expressions there, you can extract an explaining variable that explains what is this condition and use it on the if. So that could work here. But if you're using this magic number outside of this file, outside of this function or this module, you can't just access a variable like that. Maybe if it is like a class variable or something like that, you could. But anyway, the concept is similar. I think any code here is better than the comment. It could even be a config, like you could create like an instance of a class and pass what the general channel ID is and use it inside the class. But whatever, I think the main point is the code is better than the comment in this case.
Yep. Hey folks, this is Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs, and lately I've been working on actually building out Top End Devs. If you're interested, you can go to topenddevs.com/podcast, and you can actually hear a little bit more about my story about why I'm doing what I'm doing with Top End Devs, why I changed it from devchat.tv to Top End Devs. But what I really want to get into is that I have decided that I'm going to build the platform that I always wished I had with devchat.tv, and I renamed it to Top End Devs because I want to give you the resources that are going to help you to build the career that you want, right? So whether you want to be an influencer in tech, whether you want to go and just max out your salary and then go live a lifestyle with your family, your friends, or just traveling the world or whatever, I want to give you the resources that are going to help you do that. We're going to have career and leadership resources in there, and we're going to be giving you content on a regular basis to help you level up and max out your career. So go check it out at topenddevs.com. If you sign up before my birthday, that's December 14th. If you sign up before my birthday, you can get 50% off the lifetime of your subscription. Once again, that's topenddevs.com. I didn't know about the to do or die gem, and I like that. So I'm going to call that.
Right. How cool is that?
Yeah. I think I updated this article a bit later with this gem because I found it's from the guys from Test Double. It is really cool because a lot of to-do comments never get done. At least that was my experience. Whenever I created a to-do or I see to-do on code, I was already doing something else. So I haven't time to stop in doing that. So what people do is they just put a to-do and forget about it and probably never get back to this. But when you have a gem like this, to do or die, you have to do it because otherwise you'll have homework.
Yep.
It's very, very cool. I also disagree with you about the to-dos, and I'll tell you why. I don't agree with you about the to-dos, because I like to-dos. Ever since I've realized they change color in the editor when I put them in, I've been a huge fan. But the reason I like to-dos is because I'm often dealing with multiple clients, and each of those clients often has very different code base across multiple languages. So I have to context switch a lot, probably a lot more than most developers, and oftentimes very limited, as I'm sure you know. So if I can just create a to-do here and there, that saved my bacon. And a lot of times I'll come back to a file and go, there's my to-do. I've got a minute. I'll fix that quickly. But what you're suggesting is that instead of doing it right here, right now in the code base, and by that I mean adding a to-do. I'm not talking about getting a to-do done, I'm just talking about making a note.
Yep.
Instead, I should switch to something else like Jira or GitHub and create an issue that tracks the issue properly. Isn't it? Surely it's better to have it in the code right there than to have a kind of separate thing.
Yeah, I think for the case you're making, I think the comment is better in the sense that you get back and fix it. You won't like commit this and push to production, this to the comment. It's just intermediate step. And as I said, comments are often used as an intermediate step between tests. So that's fine. What I'm saying is you won't put a to-do comment and push it and just leave for someone else to handle that. I think in our case, it's more like a reminder than than everything. So it could be a to-do comment. It could be like a markdown file. I often create markdown files and write what I'm supposed to do and then I'll do it. It could be a reminder on a reminder or to-do app. Everything works here. I think what you're trying to do is just to remind yourself that you have to do something, and how you do this is up to you. But doing this as a form to express what the code should do and is not doing, or something that has to be refactored or whatever, upgrade dependencies, this is not a reminder. This is something you have to do. And I don't think comments are the best way because they are not easily trackable. You can assign them to people. It's kind of hidden. Imagine all open source gems having comments instead of issues. It would be a mess because no one else, it would be a mess to handle who's trying to fix what and which issues are not being worked on. So I think for that case, issue trackers or whatever are better. But if it's just a reminder for something that you'll do later, it's okay. I'll do this all the time. So I think they are not quite the same problem.
I come from a long line of to-doers. My father, to my knowledge, spent 30 years that I know about fixing a window. I very regularly push to-dos to production. And that segues very nicely into something I wanted to touch on, which was your article on writing RuboCops.
Oh, yeah.
Custom RuboCops, which is absolutely fantastic
Thanks.
article because it also looks at using the kind of Ruby parser tree. So you can kind of pick out things in your code. In my case, then a to-do detector, you could just use a regex. But in your article, you also talk about, how to, I think you're picking out the actual symbol used to call a module or a class, and that's a really great read.
That was, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I don't love the RuboCop comments either. Get about 8 of those going. That's always fun.
And it's the ones where you can turn off RuboCop by putting magic comment in.
Yep. On the to-dos, as long as it's accompanied by some other system, right? So to do or die. I've seen Git hooks, right, that collect them and remind you about them. Something.
The comments by themselves are not sufficient. About the RuboCops, those are like another way to avoid comments. I didn't know about RuboCops at the time I wrote the comments article, but they serve that purpose as well because they're code and you can automate stuff. I'm not sure if you can. I think you can parse comments with RuboCop, and in that way, it's great because you can treat it sort of like code, but it's not first class as code itself. But we created that RuboCop, and we could keep track of feature flags that are not used or unknown and are used. I didn't get to actually create like a RuboCop that actually corrects the code, but that's doable as well. So you can make your RuboCop fix code for you, which is another cool thing that comments can do. So even to those certain type of to-dos, you could automate to get automatically done if you want.
What I need is a system that takes a failing test, calls a RuboCop on that test, pipes it through to the GitHub Copilot API, that then replaces that code and then fixes the test.
When you have that, let me know.
Right. So one other thing in here that you said, hey, this is okay to use comments for. Yard is evil. Yard
what?
is freaking evil. Okay? If you're putting comments in to get your yard documentation, you're bad and you should feel bad. Because you're writing lies. Lies that turn into HTML that is beautiful and lies. Now, if you're writing a library and you're keeping it up to date because you want the documentation to work, great. That's fine. You're not evil. You're just kind of evil. But if it's your own code, like if you're writing a Rails app or you're writing some other thing and it's just you and your team, I'm sorry. Use a damn wiki. And then when the wiki's out of date, you can at least say, well, we haven't been updating the wiki. But the problem is that those comments, they get put in and they're never, ever, ever updated unless there's some public consequence for it. Like, hey, your documentation is wrong, right? Somebody will tweet it and you get embarrassed and you go fix it. Or your readme's wrong, right? And so you go and you'll fix it. But I'm sorry, yard comments are just lies. They may not be lies today, but they will be lies tomorrow. And the other thing is that, yeah, well, that's my main beef. But the other thing is they're freaking ugly.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when you say yard comments get out of date, you're not saying yard comments. You say comments at all because that's not particular to yard. I think that...
Yeah, but... Okay, go ahead. I'll let you say your thing and then I'll say my thing.
I think they're great for libraries, as you said. I think, for example, Rails is great benefits from having its documentation being generated from comments. And Ruby does the same for its documentation. And that's great. I think having the comments there next to the code actually makes them more easy to update as you update code as well. Because if you have to update code and then clone another repo that has the docs, it's more work and it's probably going to take longer to get the comments, the docs and the code in sync. So I think in that case for libraries, especially, and maybe public APIs, it's good to have the comments right next to the code. But I agree with you. I haven't worked with many apps that had comments for their classes, like the models and controllers. That is just weird. I haven't seen that. And I don't think that's needed unless you have like an app, which is a Shopify scale, which has a whole lot of problems that we more mortals don't have. So it's not the same thing. I agree with you 100% that comments shouldn't be used for your app. And that's one of the cases that you should make the code speak for itself. You should have clear domain models. You should have clear method names because that will help much more than comments.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing is that how do I use this? Because that's usually what it is it's, okay, this is a library. It's somebody else's code. How do I use this? What is this expecting? What's the behavior? Yeah, I need to know all that for a library. But if I'm writing my own code or I'm writing code for my team, I that should all be documented already.
Yep. And when you're...
I'd just like to say, Chuck, that documentation without examples is not documentation.
That's totally fair.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing is like Elixir, for example, they have something similar to Yard, except that their documentation system actually runs the code, right?
Oh.
It's legit a test. And so I don't have as much of a beef about that because, yeah, it's a comment, but it's going to get validated every time you run your tests. And if that's the way that the Yard documentation worked, and I'd love to see something like that written for Ruby, I'd mostly be okay with it. It's still ugly.
Yeah.
I can live with it because it's at least accurate. The issue that I run into there is that, yeah, the API changes a little bit, the assumptions change a little bit, and it's doing stuff I don't expect it to.
Yep. And you like it better because it's closer to code, because it looks more like code. So 100% of that. And I didn't know that feature, and it's really cool. And as you said, it's similar to tests, which is another thing that I think is better than comments. So yeah, 100% of that. I love if Ruby has that too.
Yeah. And yeah, so, and that kind of speaks to Luke's point where, would you rather have tests or comments? I'd rather have tests. because I can see exactly how the thing is called. I can see what it does, and I can see that it works.
And it is like an example in itself. If the test is well written, is a living example.
True. So, that's true. Poorly written tests sometimes are worse than poorly written or out-of-date comments.
Great. I think sometimes when tests are really, really bad, they're worse than having no test at all, because they slow us down. Bad testing is just worse than having no test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, I just had to bring that up because I have more often than not seen the Yard style documentation stuff just cause more problems than actual good.
Yeah, it's a good opportunity to improve Ruby itself. I might have a look on Elixir to see if I can at least try to bring this.
I can't remember what the system's called, but it's out there. But yeah, and anyway. But yeah, the other thing is the magic comments just drive me crazy. So anyway.
Which magic comments?
Any of them. Frozen string literal, Rubocop. Take your pick.
Yeah.
It's weird. Like,
we stole it from JavaScript and it was stupid there. Strict mode. If you want people to do it, just turn it on in the engine and then let me put a flag on my Ruby if I want it off.
It messed me up in Japan because in Japan the computers don't use UTF-8. They use a system called Shift-JIS. And I got used to putting kind of encoding UTF-8 everywhere. And none of my code worked during this pretty high-pressure demo in the States on this Japanese guy's laptop. I was like, what's going on? I can't even do string operations anymore in Ruby. What could possibly be going on? And it's because it was running on a Windows system and all my encoding UTF-8 lines just or lack of them broke the whole thing. Again, you only really hit these problems when you're kind of moving between kind of out of the Anglo world into, languages that have more interesting character sets. I'd like to pitch my system of comments, Matthias, and get your feedback on it. So my system for comments is more is more. You can always delete a comment, but you can never add it back in.
Sure, you can. It's called Git. I mean, that's the other thing, too, that drives me a little bit nuts is, we deleted this blah, 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 comment. It's like, no, that's a commit message.
Yeah.
You can get it back just by doing a revert. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
The bottomless pit of everyone's Git history. I have a rule which I enforce strictly on all my projects now, is that at the top of every file, I have a comment in it that says what that file does, what it's responsible for. So if it's just a command line utility or a class, there must be a comment at the top that tells me what it does. And the reason for this is because firstly, it means that I wrote it. So it's great. And secondly, I can identify code other people have written. Secondly, it's a lot quicker than reading the code, because if I can't get that instant summary of what it does, then I have to look at the code and I could be there for quite a long time. And the reason I like to do that is because even if it's wrong, it still captures the intent of the class, the intent of the file, the intent of the script. And often that tells me more. If there's a mismatch between what the comment says it should be doing and what it's actually doing, that is important information for me. The second place I've always put a comment is at the start of every method, unless it's totally trivial, where I'd say what the method should be doing. So I don't go into any kind of types and kind of classes, input, any of that. I say, this is what the method does. Above it, I know Python has automated systems for documentation where you put a comment after the function definition. I don't do that. I always put it before, because that's how I kind of find my way around my code base. I know this breaks Uncle Bob's rules about using this kind of thing to navigate your code base, but I find it just really speeds up my work to have a little readable plain English comment above the method. So instead of reading it, I can just look at the comment and know, oh yeah, that's what that does. But what am I doing wrong?
I think I don't have a problem with that. I think when you say that you describe like each file, what it's doing, and because it's faster than reading the whole file, it depends on the problem. Maybe the file is too big and it should be smaller. But assuming that is a small class, anyway, I think that's fine, because as you said, you can get faster on things. But my problem is when the code itself is not synced up with the comment, and the comment is wrong. What do you do? So not always the comment is right. Maybe the requirements change, or maybe your intention changed and your second thought what you did first, and now you're doing it differently. Maybe that's a problem because other people won't know if the code or the comment is right. So if you're working by yourself, I mean, you can do anything that makes you faster. That when you're working by yourself, it's totally different. You can name variables with small names, and that I have no problem with that. And indie game developers do that all the time because it's faster to make like quick and dirty code. And there's a different set of problems. But when you're working with people, is that when comments start become bad, because comments may mislead people. They may tell lies, as Charles said. So that's the problem. If you have everything in your mind, that's fine. You don't need even to write good code because you understand you wrote everything. But maybe in 6 months, maybe in 1 year from now, those comments will be out of sync and they will be a problem for you because you won't remember which one is right. So about the method comments, I kind of have a problem with that. I have like my gut reaction is just like that. And I think the method name should serve the purpose of the comment you're making, and maybe better naming could solve this, but it's really hard to say without seeing actual code. So we're just talking philosophy here.
That and you're wrong, Luke. But other than that.
Well, it's interesting. So I never used to do that when I used to code on my own. This is a strategy I developed after coding off of people because I found it incredibly difficult to pick up their projects because I had a lot of files where you literally had to read the code. And there's a lot of code, there's maybe kind of 1,000, 2,000 line files for this kind of, e-commerce retail systems. And the day would just go. And sometimes I'd find myself reading this thing going, oh, I've read this before. I looked at this 8 months ago. If only I'd made a note to avoid reading all this stuff. And I think the reason I like it is because my comments generally don't go into specifics about the function. Instead, I like to have a nice short, tight name, like kind of send _ CSV, right? But the comment will give a bit more context to that. So it will say it's sending a CSV to that particular system over a network. So I think I'm still right. So essentially, I think I'm still right, Jack. I haven't changed my mind at all. People just don't appreciate my comments for the genius they are.
I mean, everybody's gonna see different trade-offs with it. I mean, for me, my test files should all be named by a convention where I can find the test. And so if I really want to know what the code does, I can look at the test, I can read the code, and that should be good enough most of the time. But yeah,
100% on that. And even the test names are one way to describe better situations and whys of stuff. I know that it takes a bit more to read the test and then read the code, but I think the benefits of having the test and having codes outweighs the time you spend reading them. And there's a lot of tools that help you automate stuff like running tests and linkers and code checkers and type checkers and all that stuff. I think that's literally much better than the comments. But I'm not avoiding comments everywhere just for the sake of it. I think that when you have better tools, you have to use them, and you should take advantage of the tools you have. And when the comments are the best tools for you, go ahead and use them. There's no problem with that.
Yep. Cool. Well, any other aspects of comments that we should dive into here before we go to picks?
No, I think we're pretty much summed up everything. And I think that my whole goal here is try to think before comment. Like, can I solve this problem without a comment? Can I use code to solve this? If you somehow it's a way to use code, that's a win. And if comments is better on that occasion, good. Go ahead and comment. There's no problem with that. You're not sinning. I say that comments are a code smell, but not all smells mean something bad. It's just that it may indicate that there's a problem. If you're commenting because a file is too large to read, maybe that file shouldn't be that large. Maybe you should split some classes and modules into small files, and that would be easier to understand. And as I said, better naming goes a long way. And that's it. That's the the summary of it.
Yep. All right. Good deal. Hi, this is Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs. And lately I've been coaching some people on starting some podcasts and in some cases just taking their career to the next level. You know, whether you're beginner going to intermediate going to advanced, whether you're trying to get noticed in the community or go freelance, I've been helping these folks figure out how to get in front of people, how to build relationships, and how to build their careers and max out and just go to the next level. So if you're interested in talking to me and having me help you go to the next level, go to topenddevs.com/coaching. I will give you a 1-hour free session where we can figure out what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, and figure out what the next steps are. And then from there, we can figure out how to get you to the place you want to go. So once again, that's topenddevs.com/coaching. Well, let's go ahead and do some picks. Luke, do you want to start us off with picks?
Well, it's funny we were talking about philosophy earlier because my pick for this week is the audiobook version of The History of Philosophy by A.C. Grayling, which my father put me onto. It's an enormous book. It's about 28 hours, I think, audiobook. So, it's a good value, and it takes you all the way through Western philosophy in a biographical nature. So it says, Socrates did this, and he talked about that. Plato did this, talked about that, all the way through to Marx in the present day. And it covers Leibniz, who came up with the original monad. So Leibniz's philosophy had a thing called a monad, which also ties in with my second pick, which is one of the talks from RubyConf, which was about monads, which is the best talk I've seen of a practical demonstration in Ruby. Here's a monad. Here's how we're going to use it. Here's it making your code better. It uses dry monad, and I'll put a link into the show notes after I found it. But there we go. From philosophy of the original monads, not the same as the computer science one. They're quite different to the present day monad. It's monads all around, Chuck.
Nice. All right, I'm going to throw out some picks. The first pick I do the board game picks. My wife bought me a board game for Christmas. It is called Forbidden Desert, and it's made by the same people as Forbidden Island, if you've played that. It's a cooperative game, and essentially, so Forbidden Island, I'll just pick them both. Forbidden Island, effectively, what's going on is you've landed on a sinking island, and you have to collect all of the different treasures before the island sinks, right? And so if the temples that have the artifacts in it sink before you get them, you lose. If anybody drowns, you lose. If the place you take the helicopter off the island sinks, you lose, right? Otherwise, you all collaborate. You all have different special abilities beyond what everybody can do, and you're trying to win. Forbidden Desert's the same idea. It's a little bit more complicated. If you want to kind of get the simpler game, it's going to be Forbidden Island. But Forbidden Desert's kind of fun with a little bit different feel. The way that you locate the pieces of the airships, you start at the helicopter crash site on your little map, and then you kind of move from there. If anybody runs out of water and dies, you lose. If you run so there's a sandstorm that moves through the tiles for the game board, and if you run out of sand to put down for the sandstorm, you lose. Right, so basically the city under the desert got too buried for you to operate. I can't remember the other loss condition, but anyway, so there are 3 ways to lose, and then it's kind of the same deal. You're trying to find parts of the airship and then put it together so you can fly out. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. Games run a half hour, maybe a little longer, 45 minutes on the outside. Plays up to 5 people. Anyway, super fun game. So I'm going to pick those, Forbidden Island, Forbidden Desert. As far as anything else goes, I'm just going to give a quick update on Top End Devs. So if you go sign up now, you can get into the Slack channel. This is as of the 30th of December. So I'm adding stuff in actively now. But yeah, you get in the Slack channel, the water cooler chat, you can actually give the bot in there a command and it'll actually match make you up with somebody else so you can jump on like a virtual coffee or something. And I'm adding channels for all the shows. It's going to periodically just drop a resource that people should look at, is something that I'm planning to add in there. But I mean, honestly, my goal is to give people the resources they need to become the top 5% of developers in whatever field they're in. So in our case, it's Ruby, right? But it could be Rails, it could be Rhoda. I mean, however you want to reckon that. But I really want to give people the tools to be able to do that, right? So, I'm going to be putting together sort of a short course on the common practices I see with people who are doing that, as far as like publishing and learning and, things like that, meeting people. And then there are going to be videos coming out on a regular basis so that you can be consistently learning and growing, not just your tech skills, but also your soft skills. And I really want to put an emphasis on the soft skills that make a difference for folks. So we're going to be putting all that together. And then I am bringing back the podcast bootcamp. I'm going to be doing it a little bit different. It's going to be focused coaching. So if you're interested in that, you can just email me, chuck@topenddevs.com, and we'll get on a call and we'll figure out what you're looking to do and if it's a good fit for you. Obviously, I'm not going to take people on as on that coaching program unless I really think I can deliver for them. So, we'll have to have a talk and make sure that what outcomes you want are realistic for what what we can do with the podcast. So anyway, those are my picks. I'm also just going to real quick pick the DigitalOcean app platform. That's what I'm using to host Top End Devs, and it's awesome. It's working really, really well. The only thing that I've run into that didn't seem to work well was if I used a Docker file. So if I deployed from a Docker file, I don't know why, and I think it might have just been the way I put my Docker file together, but that didn't work. But if you just use the vanilla app platform setup, that seems to work just fine. So anyway, those are my picks. Mateus, what are your picks?
So this year it was my first year using a MacBook, and coming from Linux, that was really weird. And one thing that I really missed was like having shortcuts to resize windows and split screen and all that stuff. So I found this app called Rectangle for macOS, and it makes this work. It adds a lot of shortcuts for you and can resize windows and can do all sorts of stuff, and I really loved it. And my second pick is a book called Crafting Interpreters by Robert Nystrom. It is a book that explains how to create a interpreted language, pretty much like JavaScript. And it builds from the ground up. You build everything without any external tool. You end up actually building two languages, or better saying, the same language twice. You build it once with a simpler approach with Java, and you build the second one when you build the virtual machine in C, and it looks a lot like Ruby's. So if you're into Ruby and if you want to know how Ruby, Python, all other kind of languages work, you may want to read this book. It's really approachable. I didn't know anything about programming languages and compilers before reading it. And it's a pleasure to read, and it's really, really good. And you can read it for free online. But if you want to, you can buy the book on Amazon as well. So that's my second pick.
Cool. All right. One more question. If people want to find you online, where do they find you?
You can find me on Twitter and GitHub at Mateus Rich, which is MatheusRich. And it's the same thing everywhere. So we put on the show notes, but it's my handle everywhere. So just ping me out. And if you want to talk about comments and all the fun stuff, and you can reach me out on Twitter.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. But thank you for coming. This was awesome.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks. Until next time, max out.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more.